The bell rang, and the children rushed out of the school gate. Some laughed, some shouted, some ran to the arms of waiting mothers. But one boy walked alone. His head was down. In his hand he carried a small plastic bag. Inside it were his shoes, torn, the soles almost gone, holes near the toes. He didn't want anyone to see. He walked barefoot. The road was hot. Dust clung to his feet, but he didn't complain. His name was Samir, only 10 years old. His eyes were tired, but he had a dream. He wanted to become someone important, someone his mother could be proud of. At home, the small door creaked open. A curtain hung where the door should be. Samir stepped in quietly. The house was just one room. A bed, a mat, a broken shelf, a single bulb hung from the ceiling. It blinked often. He put his shoes beside the shelf. Then he washed his feet with a cup of water. His mother was not home. She worked in a tailor's shop. She came late, always tired, always quiet. But when she looked at Samir, she smiled. Samir took out his books, sat on the floor, opened his notebook. His handwriting was small and neat. He began to do his homework. The bulb flickered, then went out. Darkness. He waited. Nothing. He got up, walked to the shelf, took out a candle, lit it with shaking hands. The small light danced. Shadows moved on the wall. He sat again. His eyes burned, but he kept writing. Hours passed. The curtain moved. His mother entered. Her feet were swollen. She wore a simple old dress, a scarf on her head. She looked at Samir and smiled. "Did you eat?" she asked. He nodded. He had not eaten, just drank water. But he didn't want her to worry. She sat beside him. Her fingers were red, pricked by needles. She opened her bag, took out cloth pieces, a needle thread. She began sewing, stitch by stitch. Quietly, patiently, Samir watched her. "Emmy," he whispered, "why don't you sleep?" She smiled again. "Because you have to study," she said. He looked down. Tears filled his eyes, but he wiped them quickly. He didn't want her to see. She was sewing a blouse. Her eyes were half closed. Her hands moved slowly. Samir closed his book. "Emmy," he said, "I will study hard. One day you won't have to sew at night." She paused, looked at him. "One day," she said softly, "but today is not that day." He lay down on the mat. The candle was still burning. His mother kept sewing. The sound of thread moving through cloth was the only sound in the room. Samir watched the ceiling, thought about school. The teacher had asked, "What do you want to become?" Others said doctor, engineer, pilot. Samir said, "I want to become light." The class laughed. The teacher asked again. "What do you mean?" Samir had said. "I want to become something that removes darkness." At that moment, the candle flickered again, then died. Darkness again. His mother didn't move. She reached beside her, took another candle, lit it. Her face glowed for a second. Samir watched her silently. He wanted to get up, hold her hand, say thank you. But he didn't. He knew she would say, "Sleep, Beta." Outside, dogs barked. Inside, time moved slowly. Samir closed his eyes, dreamt of books, lights, clean shoes, a stage, and his mother smiling in the crowd. In that dream, she wasn't tired. She wasn't sewing. She was wearing a new dress. Samir was giving a speech. The crowd clapped. The light was bright and warmed out. Back in the room, the candle melted, wax dripped. His mother's head nodded, but her hands kept moving. Stitch by stitch, cloth by cloth, a silent promise to her son. The next morning, Samir woke up. His mother was already gone. A warm roti was kept near his book. He smiled, wore his torn shoes again, walked to school, barefoot, the shoes in a plastic bag. But this time, he walked a little faster, a little taller, because he remembered her words. Today is not that day, but one day, it will be. That evening, he came home and waited. The bulb flickered again, then stopped. Total darkness? Samir lit the last candle, but the flame didn't rise. It went out quickly. He tried again. Still nothing. He looked out the window. The sky was dark. Too dark. He walked out of the house, looked down the road. His mother had not come home. Samir stood in the silence, holding the dead candle. His heart beat faster. He waited. 1 minute, then 2, then 5. The road was empty. The night was growing. He stepped back inside, sat near the empty table, and stared at the candle. Suddenly, the curtain moved. Samir turned. There she was, but something was wrong. Her hand was bleeding. She dropped the cloth, bagged and sat on the floor. Samir ran to her. "Emmy." She smiled weakly, opened the bag, pulled out a candle and said, "Let there always be light." Samir didn't understand, but he took the candle, lit it. The room glowed again in that soft light. He saw her face, tired but full of love. She picked up the cloth again and began to sew. Samir sat beside her, opened his book, and together, under that one candle, a mother stitched, and a son dreamed. The sun was high when the lunch bell rang at school. Children ran to open their lunch boxes. The smell of parathas, pickles, and rice filled the room. Laughter echoed through the small classroom. Samir sat quietly in a corner. His hands were on his desk. His eyes stared at the window. "Aren't you eaten?" a boy asked. Samir smiled and shook his head. "I'm fasting today." The boy blinked. "But it's not Ramadan." Samir nodded again. "It's for a special prayer," he said. The boy believed him and walked away. Samir looked down. His stomach made a small sound. He hadn't eaten anything since last night. Just a glass of water in the morning. He didn't want to lie, but what could he do? There was no food in his bag, not even a crumb. He looked around. Everyone was busy eating. Samir quietly stood up, walked out, and sat under a tree behind the school. A few ants crawled near his feet. He watched them, trying to forget the hunger. He pulled out his notebook and began to draw a house. A bulb, a sewing machine, a boy with a book, a woman with a needle. He smiled, but the hunger didn't leave. The next day the same thing happened. Again he said he was fasting. Again he went outside. Again he sat alone. But this time, someone saw him. It was his class teacher, Miss Farida. She stood at the window, watching. Her eyes followed him. That evening she called him to her desk. "Samir," she said softly, "are you really fasting?" Samir looked at her and hesitated. He wanted to say yes, but his throat was dry. He looked down and said nothing. Miss Farida didn't scold him. She gently placed a hand on his head. "Come to my desk tomorrow during lunch," she whispered. The next day during the lunch break, he walked slowly to her table. She smiled and opened a small tiffin. "I made too much," she said. "Will you help me finish it?" Samir looked at the roti, the sabzi, the pickle. His eyes filled with tears. He nodded. He didn't say thank you. He couldn't. His lips trembled. Miss Farida watched him eat slowly, carefully, as if the food was a gift from heaven. From that day on, every lunch break, she shared her tiffin with him. No questions, no lectures. Just quiet kindness. Days passed. Samir began smiling more. He was doing better in class. He started reading aloud, answering questions, even helping others. His stomach was not empty anymore, and neither was his heart. Every time he opened the notebook, the lines were clearer, the drawings sharper, the handwriting stronger. At night, his mother still sewed under the candlelight, but she noticed the change in him. "You look happy these days," she said. Samir nodded. "I like school," he whispered. But one Monday, everything changed. Samir walked into class and waited for the lunch bell. When it rang, he walked to Miss Farida's desk like always. But the desk was empty. He looked around. A substitute teacher stood near the board. "Where's Miss Farida?" he asked. The teacher replied, "She's on leave, maybe for a few days." Samir felt cold. He walked back to his seat. His bag was empty again. He went outside, sat under the tree, looked at the ants again. But this time, he couldn't focus. His stomach hurt. His eyes stung. The next day, she didn't return. Nor the day after. Samir waited. The lunches stopped. The silence returned. That evening, he came home and sat on the floor. He didn't open his book. He didn't light the candle. His mother noticed. "What happened, Beta?" He shook his head. Nothing, but his voice broke. His mother walked to him, sat beside him, and held his hand. "You can tell me," she said. Samir looked at her and whispered, "I miss someone." His mother didn't ask more. She just held him tighter. The next morning, as Samir packed his bag, he found something strange inside. A small silver lunchbox. He opened it. Inside was a paratha folded neatly with a bit of jam. He blinked. Where did it come from? He ran to the curtain. "Amy," she smiled. "Just because I sew at night doesn't mean I don't know what happens in your day." Samir hugged her tightly. At school, he sat quietly, opened the lunchbox, and took a small bite. It wasn't perfect. The bread was dry, the jam too sweet. But to Samir, it tasted like love, like hope. As the week went on, he began to eat again, slowly, thankfully. But still, he missed Miss Farida. Then one day, after class, he found a folded note in his book. No name, no handwriting. He knew. Just one sentence. "You must learn too. Stand on your own now." Samir stared at it for a long time. His hands shook. How did it get there? Who wrote it? He looked around the room. The teacher was writing on the board. His classmates were packing their bags. No one seemed to notice. He put the note in his pocket, walked out of the class, and looked up at the sky. It was blue, clear, wide, just like his dream. He knew the hunger might come again. He knew the light might flicker, but he also knew something else now. Samir stood outside the school office, his heart beating fast. His name was on the board, written clearly, in black marker. Finalist City Scholarship Exam. He had made it. His hands shook as he touched the board. Other students stared. Some clapped. Some just looked surprised. Samir didn't care. His eyes filled with tears. He ran home. "Amy," he shouted from the street. She rushed to the door, her hands still covered in thread and cloth. "What happened? Why are you crying?" He held up his notebook. "I got selected. I passed the first round." Her face lit up. She dropped the cloth in her hand, hugged him tightly. "Shook her high," she whispered. "Shook her high." That night, she worked faster than ever, stitching blouse after blouse. Her fingers moved like the wind. Samir sat beside her, studying. The candle burned slow. Hope filled the little room. The next round was in the city, a scholarship interview at a big school. If he passed, his fees would be paid, his books given, and he could finally dream bigger. "Amy," he said, "what if they ask hard questions?" She smiled. "Then, answer them with truth. Truth always reaches the heart." The day came. The sun was just rising when they left home. His mother had wrapped the only white shirt he had in a cloth. They reached the city by bus. The school gates were tall and shiny. Everything looked clean, big, and new. Samir had never seen such a place. He looked down at his pants, faded, his sandals worn. He wiped them quietly, then took out the white shirt. His mother helped him wear it. But when he looked in the mirror at the school washroom, his heart sank. The shirt had a stain. Near the pocket, a yellowish spot. It was small, but clear. He tried rubbing it with water, but it didn't go. His hands started shaking. His eyes watered. What if they think I'm dirty? He thought. He stepped into the interview room. 3 people sat at a big table. They smiled. Come in, Samir, one of them said. He walked slowly, head down. Sit, said another. They asked him about his school, his favorite subject, his dream. He answered honestly. They asked him to read a paragraph. He did. He even explained it. He thought he had done well, but as he stood up to leave, one of the men whispered to the other. Their eyes fell on his shirt. The man cleared his throat. Samir, he said kindly, why didn't you wear something cleaner for such an important day? Samir froze. He didn't know what to say. His throat dried. His lips trembled. This is all I have, sir, he said softly. There was silence. The woman on the panel looked down at her file. Thank you, she said. You may go. Samir walked out. His legs felt weak. His eyes burned. His mother was waiting outside on a bench. She stood as she saw him. Kayahua, she asked. He didn't reply. He hugged her tightly. I think they didn't like my clothes. She held his head. You told the truth. That's enough. They sat quietly on the bus ride home. Samir stared out of the window. The city looked so far now, so cold. That evening he didn't touch his books. His mother didn't ask why. She quietly lit the candle, took out her needle, and began sewing again, but her hands were slower than before. That night, she walked to the market alone. She sold the extra blouses she had stitched at half price. With that money, she went to a tiny second-hand shop and stood there for a long time. She looked at shirts, touched the cloth, checked the collars. Finally, her fingers stopped on a white one. It was used, but neat. She smiled. The shopkeeper looked confused. You sure you want this? He asked. She nodded. It's not for me. Back home, she wrapped it in cloth, placed it near some pillow, then sat and waited. The next morning, when he woke up, he saw the bundle. He opened it slowly. His fingers touched the shirt, clean white, ironed. His eyes filled. Amy, he whispered. She smiled from the kitchen corner. One stain can't stop your future, she said. Try again. But before he could speak, there was a knock on the door. A postman stood outside. Letter for Samir, he said. Samir took it with shaking hands. His mother came and stood beside him. He opened the envelope, read silently, then read again. His lips didn't move. His eyes widened. They called me again, he whispered. They want to give me another chance. His mother's hand flew to her mouth. Ya Allah, she said. Samir held the letter tight. It says they were impressed by my answers, and they want to meet me one more time. Properly. She looked at the new shirt, then at him. You will go, she said. But this time, you will go not as a poor boy, but as my son. Samir nodded. But deep inside, a question grew in his heart. Who gave him that second chance? Was it really just the answers? Or had someone seen the truth in his eyes? The second interview was just 2 days away. This time, Samir woke up before dawn. He carefully took out the new white shirt his mother had bought. He ran his fingers across the collar again and again. It still had the smell of folded cloth and a little rose oil. His mother had kept it safely wrapped in a piece of clean fabric, and he had promised not to wear it until the day came. That morning, he watched her pack his bag. 1 pen, 1 notebook, a packet of glucose biscuits. He didn't speak much. He was nervous, but deep inside, something felt different this time. He wasn't afraid anymore. He had something new hope. The sun had just risen when they reached the city again. Samir held his mother's hand tightly. She wore her old shawl, the one with small blue flowers. Her sandals were worn out, but she walked with strength. When they reached the school gate, she stopped him, adjusted his collar, wiped a tiny dust mark from his shoulder. You look like a prince. She smiled. Remember who you are? Samir walked in. This time, the guards didn't stop him. His name was already on the list. He was taken to a waiting room, and there were 6 other children like him, all wearing neat clothes, holding certificates, some whispering answers to possible questions. Samir just sat quietly. His hands held the notebook tightly. After a while, his name was called. He stood in front of the same panel. 3 people. Again, same faces. But this time, they looked at him differently. The woman smiled. You've come prepared today, she said. Samir nodded. Yes, ma'am. They asked him about world capitals, math problems, and reading comprehension. He answered everything as best as he could. At one point, the male teacher asked him, What motivates you, Samir? He paused, took a breath, then said, My mother sews clothes every night, so I can read books every day. There was silence. Then the woman said gently, That's beautiful. He smiled. They asked one last question. If we give you this scholarship, what will you do with it? Samir looked up and said, I'll use it to build a future where my mother can rest. She's worked enough. They thanked him and told him to wait for the final list by mail. Samir walked out, his legs shaking but his heart light. His mother was waiting outside, holding her scarf tightly. She looked at his face and asked, "How was it?" He smiled and said, "It was good, I think." They walked to the bus stop slowly. The crowd pushed, and there was no place to sit. His mother stood, holding the pole with one hand and her bag with the other. Samir sat on the edge of the seat. He kept looking at her tired face. He knew she hadn't eaten since morning. When they reached home, she quietly removed her sandals, sat down, and took a deep breath. Then she opened her sewing bag, but her hand froze midair. "Ammi?" Samir asked. She didn't respond. Her face was pale. "Ammi," he said again. She looked at him slowly. "I just need to rest. Just for a while." She lay down on the floor mat. Samir brought her water. She drank only 2 sips. Her hands were shaking. He sat beside her, holding her fingers. "Should I call someone?" he asked. She smiled faintly. No. I just need to sleep a little. The city air is heavy." He stayed near her all evening. She didn't sew that night. For the first time in weeks, the sewing machine stayed silent. The candle burned untouched. Samir didn't study either. He watched her sleep, her chest rising slowly, her face tired but peaceful. By morning she felt better. She cooked him a small roti and packed his school bag. "Go," she said. "They'll announce the final result in a few days. Until then, be ready." Samir nodded. He left for school, but that day passed slowly. Every tick of the clock felt longer. That evening, when he returned home, he found his mother awake, sitting with the cloth pieces again. Her hands were slower. She stitched carefully, pausing every few minutes. "You don't have to sew tonight," he said. "I'll start working. Part-time, I can earn a little." But she looked at him firmly. "No," she said. "You will study. My hands can still stitch. That's my part. Your part is to learn." That night, while Samir read beside the candle, the door knocked. He opened it slowly. It was the neighbor, Uncle Waid, holding a newspaper in one hand and a letter in the other. "Post for you," he said. "Looks official." Samir took the letter with shaking hands. His mother came and stood beside him. He opened it slowly. It was a thick paper typed neatly. His eyes scanned the words. His lips parted, but no sound came out. His mother placed a hand on his shoulder. "Kaya. He looked at her, tears filling his eyes. "I got it, Ammi. I got the scholarship." She gasped, covered her mouth, then hugged him tightly. "Marabate," she whispered. "You did it." Samir was smiling now, truly smiling. But then, she suddenly pulled back and winced in pain. Her hand touched her stomach. "Ammi, are you okay?" She nodded. "I'm fine. I'm just tired." Samir wanted to believe her, but as he looked at her pale face and weak arms, something inside him whispered she was hiding something. The air was heavy. The crowd buzzed with energy. On both sides of the track, families waved flags and shouted names. Coaches barked last-minute tips, but Armand stood in silence. His heart pounded, not from nerves but from something deeper. It was the moment he had dreamed of for months. The moment he had trained for in silence, in pain, in the early morning cold. He looked down at the track, then at the boy in the lane next to him. Tall, confident, expensive shoes, someone who belonged here. Armand took a deep breath. He didn't. But he was here. The starter raised the gun. "On your marks, set." Bang. Armand exploded forward. His arms pumped, legs stretched, heart raced. For the first 10 meters, he stayed behind. But then, slowly, he began to push. He remembered the words, "fail forward." He remembered the eyes, his mother's, Miss Shabana's. He remembered the pain, and how he never let it stop him. Halfway through the race, something changed. He wasn't behind anymore. He wasn't in the middle. He was ahead, just by a little. But enough. The crowd began to roar. "Who's that?" Someone shouted. "That's not Faison." Someone else said, "No, that's Armand, the boy who always came last." In the final seconds, he gave everything. His breath burned, his legs screamed, but he didn't slow down. And then, it was over. He crossed the finish line. First. For a moment, time froze. He looked around, not sure it had really happened. The official came over with a clipboard. "Armand Khan, lane 4, first place, official time, 12.4 seconds. People clapped. Some cheered, but not many, because no one had expected him to win. And when someone unexpected wins, the world takes a moment to process. His eyes searched the crowd. He didn't see his mother. She was still in the hospital. He didn't see Miss Shabana. She was gone. He didn't even see Coach Jamal. The victory felt quiet. Then someone from the crowd shouted, "He must have cheated." Armin turned sharply. Another voice added, "That boy? First place. No way." Whispers grew. A few laughed. One official double-checked the timer. Someone asked for a rerun. Armand's heart sank. His first win, his only win, was now a question mark. He stepped away from the track and sat alone on the grass. The gold medal hung around his neck, but it felt like paper. Just then, a small hand touched his arm. He turned. It was his sister. He blinked in disbelief. How are you here?" She grinned. "I told the nurse to let me out. I said I had to see my brother fly." He laughed softly. "But you're supposed to be resting." She sat beside him. "I couldn't miss it. You did it. Bye. You won." He looked down. They think I cheated. She frowned. But you didn't. He shook his head. Doesn't matter. No one clapped, no one believed. She held his hand tightly and whispered, I did. That was the only applause he needed. Coach Jamal appeared then, holding a water bottle. You ran like fire, he said quietly. Arman didn't respond. Coach sat down beside him. People don't cheer for surprises, Arman. They cheer for the expected. You weren't expected. I thought I'd feel something, Arman said. Joy? Pride? Relief? Coach nodded. You're feeling something bigger. Growth. That's quieter, but stronger. Arman looked at his medal. What now? Coach leaned back. Now we get ready for what comes next. And trust me, it'll be harder. Because now they'll watch you. That evening, back home, Arman placed the medal on his mother's hospital table. She smiled weakly and whispered, I always knew. He sat beside her, notebook in hand, and wrote, Today I won. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like standing alone in a storm. But then a small hand reached out and held mine. That made it real. The next day, news spread across the school. Some students congratulated him. Others mocked. One thing had changed. Everyone knew his name now. Even the principal called him to the office. You've been selected for the city-level trials, he said, 3 weeks from now. Arman was quiet. Do you want to compete? Arman thought. Of his mother, still weak. Thought of his little sister, skipping medicine to watch him. Thought of the doubt, the whispers, the strange silence after his victory. Then he stood tall and said, Yes. Outside the office, Faison waited near the staircase. You ran like someone who had something to prove, he said. Arman replied. Faison looked down. Maybe one day. I'll run again too. Arman nodded. You should, even if no one claps. That night, Arman sat by the window. The sky was quiet, no stars, just the hum of the city. He opened his notebook and wrote, Sometimes your first win feels like your first heartbreak, but maybe that's what makes it real. Maybe the world doesn't clap now, because one day, it will. And then, in bold letters, at the bottom, they knew my name today not because I shouted, but because I ran. 3 weeks later, Arman stood at the gate of the biggest stadium he had ever seen. Flags waved, cameras rolled. Runners from top schools across the city walked past him, some with team jackets, others with personal coaches. He wore his old school shirt, slightly faded, and the same pair of shoes Faison had given him. His name was now on the official list. Arman Khan School. 47 raced 200 meters. But his heart wasn't in the stadium. It was in a hospital room. Beside a weak woman who hadn't smiled properly in days, his mother's condition had worsened. She now needed oxygen more often. Her voice was softer, her movements slower. Doctors said she'd need to be admitted longer. She had insisted he go to the race. But when he left that morning, she didn't speak. She only looked at him with tired eyes. And nodded. That image stayed with him. As he entered the changing room, he saw the other boys laughing, stretching, checking their watches. Arman sat alone on a wooden bench and opened his notebook. A folded paper slipped out. It was the letter from Miss Shabana. The world has forgotten many great names before they became great. Don't let this be the end of your story. He closed his eyes and held the paper close. Outside, the announcement echoed. Next, City Trials 200-meter sprint. All participants to track. He stood up and walked out. The stadium lights were blinding. Crowds roared. Teachers waved school banners. Reporters held microphones near the track. He took his position in lane 5. He scanned the stands. She wasn't there. Her seat was empty, the very first row where she had promised to sit. His heart sank. Just then, he felt a hand on his shoulder. Coach Jamal. She's watching, he said quietly. Arman looked up. Coach pointed toward the sky. From wherever she is, she's watching. Arman nodded. He bent forward, took position. The world faded. There was no stadium, no crowd, just a dusty track from his school. Just a tired boy running before sunrise. Just a mother sewing under yellow light. Just a teacher with kind eyes. Just a sister with missing teeth. Just a dream. Bang, the gun fired, and Arman ran. Not to win, but because stopping now would betray every version of him who had refused to quit. He stayed close to the front, breath heavy, legs burning but heart steady. With 50 meters left, 2 runners surged ahead. He pushed harder. 20 meters left. His legs screamed. The old pain returned. His shoes felt tight. The noise was deafening. Then he crossed the line. Third. He fell to the ground, gasping, tears in his eyes. Not because he lost, but because the seat was still empty. Medics helped him stand. Coach gave him water. An official came up. City Trials. 3rd place. Arman Khan. Qualifies for nationals. People clapped. His name was announced, but all he did was look at that one empty seat. Later that evening, he rushed to the hospital with the medal still around his neck. The nurse shook her head. She's resting. You can't wake her. He walked in quietly, sat beside her, held her hand, then gently placed the medal on the table beside her. Oxygen machine. She didn't open her eyes, but her fingers moved just a little, as if she knew he was there. He whispered, 3rd place. Nationals next. I know it's not gold, but I didn't stop. A tear rolled from the corner of her eye. He smiled. You kept your promise? You watched me. That night, he wrote in his notebook. The stage was set, but her seat was empty. Yet I ran like she was there, because sometimes, love doesn't need a chair, it just needs a heart that never stops believing. Next morning, when he returned to school, something was different. Students clapped. Teachers congratulated him. Even the principal shook his hand. You made us proud, he said, and you're going to nationals. But the applause still didn't feel like it mattered, because deep inside, Armin knew he didn't run for medals, he ran for the people, who couldn't be in the crowd, but for those in hospital beds, for those transferred quietly, for those who cheered in silence. He opened his notebook again, wrote one more line. They know my name now, but I still run for the ones who whispered it when no one else did. Samir sat there for a long time. The room was quiet, the air still. His mother's hand was cold in his. Her eyes remained shut. She wasn't breathing. He didn't cry, not right away. He just looked at her face, peaceful, soft, like she was sleeping after a long, hard day. But inside him, something broke quietly, like a thread snapping after too much pull. The neighbors came when they heard aunties wept. Uncle White held his shoulder. Someone said prayers softly. Another lit incense. Someone wrapped her in white cloth. Samir didn't say much, he just followed every step. Like his body moved, but his heart had stopped. As they carried her to the small graveyard nearby, he walked with bare feet. He wanted to feel the earth like she had felt it every day of her life. The funeral was small but full of love. Women whispered how generous she was. Men spoke about her strength. Someone said, she never asked for help, but always gave it. Another said, she raised him well. Very well. Samir stood there, quiet, still. When the soil was placed over her, he placed her favorite thimble on top, an old one made of brass, now dull with age. It was her pride, her tool, her story. He didn't want her to leave without it. That night, he came home alone. The room was empty, but the smell of stitching thread still lingered in the air. Her trunk lay near the bed, still open. He sat beside it. For the first time in his life, he picked up the needle and thread. His hands shook. But he tried not to sew, but to understand, to connect. He pricked his finger twice. Blood came out. He smiled through tears, so this was what it felt like. Next morning, he stood at her grave again. I'll go now, he said, to the city. But I'll carry you with me, in every step, every word, every breath. He took her prayer beads in his pocket and boarded the bus. The city was loud, fast, and full of people who didn't look twice. The buildings were tall, the streets wide. But Samir felt small. The hostel room was tiny, but clean. He placed her beads near the pillow. On the first day of college, he wore his old, carefully patched shirt. She had mended it weeks before she passed. He didn't care how it looked. He wanted to wear something she touched. Classes were tough. The subjects harder than expected. But Samir studied all night. In the library, in the canteen, even in the washroom sometimes. He ate less. Saved every coin. Bought second-hand books. Took tutoring jobs for juniors in the evening. One day, while returning from class, he passed a stage where auditions were happening. A man called out, "You want to try?" Samir smiled politely. "No, sir," the man said. "We need someone raw, real. You look like you've seen life." Samir paused, then walked in. He read the lines they gave him. Slowly, honestly, from the heart. The room went silent. One of the judges said, "Who trained you?" He replied, "My mother." They laughed, thinking it was a joke, but it wasn't. Samir got the role, a small part, but powerful. His lines were few, but his eyes spoke volumes. At the performance night, the crowd clapped. Loud, long. After the show, a woman from a well-known studio approached him. "You've got something special," she said. "Want to work with us?" Samir nodded, but inside he whispered, "Amy, did you hear that?" Months passed. He juggled college, part-time jobs, and now small acting roles. His name began to appear on local theater posters, sometimes even in small magazine articles. But he never forgot where he came from. One winter night, he got a call from his village school. "Samir Beta," the old teacher said, "we heard about you. Will you come speak to our students?" He returned home the next week. The room was just as he left it, dusty, quiet, but warm in memory. He went to the school the next morning. The children sat cross-legged, waiting. Some knew his name. Others whispered, "That's the boy whose mother used to sew." Samir smiled. He stood before them and said, "Yes, that's who I am, and proud to be." He told them about the nights, without light, about studying beside candles, about the sound of the sewing machine becoming music to him, about how failure taught him more than success, and how his mother's silence shaped his voice. One little girl raised her hand. "Sir, was it very hard?" He nodded yes, but it was beautiful. After the session, one teacher took him aside. "You know," she said, "your mother used to make uniforms for free, for children who couldn't pay. We never told anyone. She never asked us to." Samir turned away. He couldn't stop the tears. That night, he sat near her grave again. This time, he wasn't sad. He was full of love, of memories, of quiet pride. He whispered, "Amy, your thread stitched my wings. And now, I'm ready to fly.